Welcome to WP Constellations, a podcast exploration of the WordPress universe, brought to you by Stellar WP. Welcome to our next episode of WP Constellations for Stellar WP, and I am just over the moon to be speaking with Josepha Haden today. Josepha, thank you for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So we're going to talk today about the Underrepresented Gender Release Squad. First of all, I love the name. Like, it got a little confusing last time. We started off as all women, including non-binary, yes. And then if some people said all women, and so I like that it's encompassing. It's really great. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, but the way it started last time, I did that to myself. I wished for something on Twitter. And then having wished for it on Twitter, it came true. And that's so rare for Twitter.
I know, right? Well, as I was telling you before the show, I wished for cowbells, and now I am the owner of far too many cowbells. So
that's right.
Twitter's
Careful
magic,
what you wish for.
Exactly. So I really want to talk. So I was at the community summit last week, and I love some of the topics that really revolve around DEIB and the work that as a community and as the open source project, I think we're doing really good, excellent, focused work on WordPress, moving DEIB forward. And for anybody listening who's wondering about acronyms, that does stand for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So my question to you is, can you tell us a little bit about the impetus behind that movement, the DEIB movement, and some of the specific initiatives that have come about in the last few years?
I assume you mean the DEIB movement for WordPress, like moving that for WordPress, not in life.
Not that like worldwide, though, specifically WordPress, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so that is something that was being worked on before I actually arrived in the WordPress project, as far as I can tell. That was something that was started by Jen Milo and then carried on through Andrea Middleton, and then is something that obviously I care a lot about. Like, that's part of what brought me to WordPress in the first place. And so that has been happening since probably like 2011. And as with anything that you have to make big changes for, but you want those changes to stick, like sometimes you got to move a little slower than you want to, so that people like get used to the change and expand with you, as opposed to like a rubber band, like being pulled quite tight and then naturally wanting to snap back. You give them a little bit of space to learn and breathe with you. And so that's kind of how that all seems to have happened early on in the WordPress project. But then when I came, like when I was hired by Automatic, when I came into this project, that direction, like specifically, I was working with urban youth, which is, of course, in many places, just code for Black children. And the kids that I was working with at the time, so I was working in Kansas City at the time with one group that was teaching technical skills to primarily the Black youth that we have in the city, but also some students who were disadvantaged for various other reasons. And then also our Hispanic community, our like, children of migrant workers that we have here in Kansas City as well. The work that I was doing there was more around like getting devices to them. Like, we had not quite gotten to the digital divide work of like making sure they know how to use the devices. We were still just working on getting devices to them. And so and I took all the learnings that I had from there and helped pull them into the WordPress project gradually as we went, and keep trying to move every little thing forward. So
I love that. And I love that the world in general seems to be splintered in a lot of ways, but also I think some of the pushback is because people are uncomfortable sometimes with change, but change is important and inevitable, and inclusion and all that goes with it is so important. So I'm so happy to be part of that.
A thing that people don't remember sometimes about change, or maybe don't know about change, is like, even if it's a good change, you're still losing something. Like you're letting
Right.
go of one thing and picking up something else. And that
Mhm.
space between letting go of especially a good thing and moving towards something that is hopefully better, like of course that's scary. Change is
Yeah.
hard no matter where it came from, why you had to do it,
Mhm.
and like your net benefits at the end. Like it's scary
Yeah.
every which way. So
Yeah.
yeah, I totally get it.
Absolutely. Growth is work. It is. It doesn't
Hmm.
just happen for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the upcoming underrepresented gender. It's going to take me a while to let that roll off my tongue, but underrepresented
Totally
gender
fine.
release. Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of go back time wise a little bit, and I'm reading my
Yeah.
questions because I crafted them so well.
They're beautiful questions.
Thank you. In November of 2019, you commented on a tweet from Francesca Morano saying, I have a
Yeah.
stretch goal of an all women release squad by the end of 2020. I'd love to
Yeah.
learn more about how that idea came to you and the process to go from a comment on a tweet to the make post that you did in March 2020 about an all women release squad that would then
Mm.
become known as the all women non binary release squad. So, what was that process?
Yeah. So that is something that I had been wanting to do for quite a while. But one thing that I know during all of the years of working on DEIB work is that like there is the inclusion part and then there is the diversity part, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's right in the name, it's right in the acronym. But I have learned over time that just calling in diverse voices and diverse people without making sure that your environment is welcoming and willing to include them actually does not serve the purpose. Like it turns all of those voices that are showing up with trust in you into just kind of token, like, look, I found them kind of actors in the space, which isn't fair to, for one, the WordPress project, because I know and believe that we are better than that. But also, certainly not fair to the people who are coming to us with that trust. I really believe that in order for any um, better diversity to work in an organization, you absolutely have to start by cleaning up your own house. And so that was an idea that I had had for a long time, but I just kind of knew that we weren't ready. Not because WordPressers are not generally pretty welcoming and inclusive, but because there's a difference between everybody kind of knowing that we are and us saying plainly, we are, and this is how we show it. Like, this is how we walk that walk along with talking the talk. Um, so it had been in my mind. And then when I tweeted it, like, I honestly didn't expect anyone to be like, heck yeah, let's do it. And I don't know
Surprise!
why. Right. It was a big surprise. I don't know why I was surprised by that, because I do know that WordPressers in general are so just kind of generous and giving and welcoming of people. But yeah, I was like, I want to do this by the end of 2020, which, if we all recall correctly, and also for future historians in the world, like that was the year where we encountered COVID for the first time.
Mhm.
That is a year when we were having to learn how to work together by staying apart, which was so
Yeah.
hard for WordPressers. Like, we're a bunch of
Mhm.
introverts, I know, not me, obviously, but like, it's a lot of introverts running around in here. And so, on the one hand, you'd think that was going to be easy. And on the other hand, we just love each other a lot. So it was really hard
Yeah.
for us to do that. But yeah, and so like the process from that wishful tweet that I made all the way to like getting it done was a lot of work on the back end, like
Yeah.
preparing everyone for it versus actually doing the work. So the first thing that I had to do was come to terms with what I was potentially doing to, at the time, the women who were joining me in that, before it had turned into the women and non-binary squad. I really worried so much that I was putting
Mm.
everyone in danger, and I was putting them right into the crosshairs of people who are bigoted and don't like the idea that women should have a space at the table and also a,
Yeah.
a plate with food on it, like the whole thing. And so I really worried. I spent probably, like, after it looked like people were rallying around it, I spent probably 2 or 3 weeks talking through like whether or not this was a selfish desire for me to be able to do that. After I talked to like 25 people and got all of the panic out, then I was like, okay, we can do it. and put together a plan to like introduce as many women and non-binary folks as wanted to learn how to do this to the process as early as possible. So like they had specific active cohorts with the major release beforehand. If I recall correctly, they then also like ran with that lead group's support the minor release after it, or one of the minor releases after it, and then led their own release after that. And so it was a long process, but also I think really valuable. So
I do too. And you said, people rallying around it and everything. And that was certainly true. There was this feeling of joy and glee around the fact that we were able to do something like this. But the opposite was also true. A smaller fraction, of course, but the opposite was also true. For example, I remember telling my father, I'm going to be part of this all women's release squad. And his response was, well, that's not fair. And we had a long conversation about why his take on that was wrong. He never changed his mind. Dad, you're just wrong. He never changed his mind. And that was okay. We had to agree to disagree on some things because you're not going to change everybody's mind. But the release squad did come under some fire from certain factions within WordPress.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, outside of WordPress too.
And I actually wrote an entire article on Post Status called "Misogyny in WordPress is Real," based on some of the fire that I particularly came under and other people with that. So do you anticipate that we'll see that again with this next release squad of underrepresented genders? And what is your advice to the community when we encounter adversarial commentary like that?
Yeah. I'm going to answer those two questions, and I might need you to remind me of them again when we get there. Sure. But first, I do want to address the initial question, the initial issue of like, there was misogyny and we all kind of experienced it in that moment. And it is exactly what I was worried about, but also like, I can't actually save us from that outside of WordPress. And so,
of course not,
but like, I also got quite a few conversations, messages, DMs about like how I needed to examine what it was that made me feel like having such an exclusive thing was good. And also in that time frame, like my entire leadership team was women, and also got a lot of feedback about how like I need to examine why it is that I am bigoted against men, right? And what I told everybody at the time, and what I would tell everyone again, and if it ever comes up again, I will say it again, like, sure, if you look at a situation where I have primarily women in my leadership team, because I still do have primarily women in my leadership team, you could say that I have a discriminatory practice in selection. But also, you always have to look at the broader context. Like, overwhelmingly, it's dudes in technology. I think it's fine to have one leadership team that's women. I think it's going to be okay. And
so far, so good.
And that's what turns out I'm not going to let go of that one either. So your question was, what do we do if we encounter it now? And also, like, do I anticipate it? I guess other way around. Do I anticipate it happening again? What do we do about it now?
Yes.
So on the one hand, I do anticipate it again. I don't think that I'm going to run into it as much as I did last time around, just because I was such an unknown quantity to people. And so I think that I probably won't encounter it too much, but I do think that a lot of the folks in our underrepresented gender release are going to get a lot of questions about like why they're doing it, why we think it's important, should it matter? Like, aren't we in a society where you can just be a person, which obviously that's not true. And so like, I think that absolutely there will be those questions. And on the one hand, I do think that it makes sense to address them quickly and neatly, but I don't think that those sorts of arguments deserve to eat from our plates, right? Like their opinion on whether or not we have rights, whether we matter, whether we exist, kind of are irrelevant. Like, I don't want people to be able to just abuse us and anybody else without anyone calling them on it. But I also don't think that after an initial moment, continuing to let them just steal your joy is
Mm-hmm.
is your responsibility. Like, it's not your responsibility to entertain the idea that you don't matter and you shouldn't be in technology and you don't have rights because you're not exactly the type of person that someone expects to see. And so the way that I handled it last time around, and the way that I would encourage anyone to handle it this time also, is to say, hey, I get it. Here are the facts, and this is why it matters. Thanks for your
Mm-hmm.
feedback, and call it good.
You're kinder than me.
I just have a different than you, I think.
I just my usual response is, you're welcome to your opinion. I'm just grateful that your opinion has no sway in this matter, is the way I usually say it.
Yeah. And that's also true.
For sure. As the executive, I was the WordPress executive director of WordPress, I probably get it backwards. What's your release in this release, or what is your role in this release squad? And is it any different than what you do with other release squads?
Yeah. So the leader of a release team, a release squad, a lot of the work is like making sure that when we need something, we have it, whether it's like extra time from people or unblocking things on a technical standpoint or in the project as a whole. And so that role will essentially be the same for me here. I will make sure that when we have questions, I have answers as best I can, or if not, I go get them and come back, and frequently as a tiebreaker. Now, there is a complication in that, because often when there is an unbreakable tie that can also not be broken by a release squad leader, they come to me or Matt and be like, hey, we're super duper drawn on this and we need you to just give us some opinion. And so on the one hand, it kind of shortens the path to final decisions, and on the other hand, people will have questions about, like, how do we know which hat you have on when you're making a decision? But in general, that release lead role is the same across the space. It's saying, like, we believe that we're going to get these primary features. We believe we're going to get these major bugs, get everything else in as best you can, and just kind of keeping the train on the tracks. It's a very much like traffic control position. So,
I remember my daughter saying to me once, when I had my first role as a supervisor and other people were working under me, and she was in grade school at the time, and she's like, well, and I would say, well, I have to work late. She goes, but you're the boss. Don't you have more time? Don't you have less responsibility? And I remember saying to her, oh, honey, I wish that were true. But unfortunately, now I'm responsible for more people. And so, there's this idea that if you sit at the top, that you only have to like rule and make decisions from your throne. But I know that number one is not true in general. And for certain, it's not true of you, who rolls up your sleeves and involved with the things that need to be done.
Yeah, Simon Sinek, and he is like, if I ever get a chance to see him speak, I will, like, wild horses could not keep me. He's one of my favorite writers of leadership, right? He had this quote, and I'm not going to get it right, so we can share it in show notes or something later. But he said this thing where he was like, becoming a leader does not give you the right to do nothing. Like, you haven't earned the right to do less. What you have is you have accepted the responsibility to do more. And I believe in that. Like, I know that I am not coding anything for core, period. But also, like, that doesn't mean that is something where I can just be like, well, I hope core's good.
Exactly.
Like, it's
you don't need to know the code to be able to help make sure that everything is going the right way and doing what is supposed to happen. For sure. No, I love that. So this past weekend was WordCamp US, and prior to that, we had the community summit. As part of this podcast, I interviewed, I think, 10 people Saturday morning with almost no voice, but it was still good. I asked them what they hoped or expected to see within WordPress over the next year. And many said that they were excited about this release team and hoped for a future where release teams like this weren't necessary as we see more inclusion in the future. Do you foresee other underrepresented teams in the future? How do you think we can keep the momentum for this kind of inclusion? And do you think we will also have the need to continue to do this? Or do you think that we'll be able to have more integration going forward? I know that's a lot.
I love this question, and I'm going to try to answer it all but
I
also
love that.
you're just going to have to like check off the things that I get, and we'll
I'm with
circle
you.
back to the things that I don't get.
Absolutely.
Um, so to answer the like the yes no question first, do I see the future of other release squads like this? Like, do I see a future need for them? Yes, absolutely. And I don't love the answer, but also it is the only possible answer. We will always have to do this kind of release. Um, do I hope it is not always underrepresented gender? Like, would I love it if the Black press crew were like, you know what we're gonna do? Run a release and get in here and do it. Like, I think that would be lovely. And I would absolutely make as much space for them to do that as they would need and want. So that's the yes no answer in there. Um, and now to get into the why behind it, because there will be a lot of people who don't like the answer. I too wish that there were a way for us to say, we now have had underrepresented releases and teams in every sector of the world, and therefore officially we have fixed bigotry. Done. And like call it good. I wish it were a switch, right?
Same.
But there is this there it is not easy to see when you are either not directly benefiting from it or not directly related to it. It's very hard to see how much activity, how much work is required to make something easy for you to take part in, right? There is this concept of the paradox of tolerance that really, really throws people for a loop. And it says that in order to have a very tolerant society, a very tolerant organization, you have to be extremely intolerant of intolerance. And I know that people are like, when I'm intolerant, you should be tolerant of my intolerance. But like, that is the thing that we always have to work against. Not because all the time tolerance is specifically filled with malice, but human beings as a whole look for things that are familiar to them, people who look like them, projects they already have done before. Like, we look for the things that are comfortable to us because it is an indicator of safety. Like, this part of our brain, the dum-dum, the lizard part of your brain, is just like a wizard at keeping you alive, but also it can easily get overwhelmed. And the fastest shorthand that it has is, does that look like me? Does that seem like a thing I've done before? Have I done this? Have I seen it? Do I know it? Like, that's how it shorthands that. And so it will always be the case that we have people who are like, that is not like me, and therefore I don't like it. And you always have to work against it. It's like if you have a messy room and you declare to yourself, I am no longer making a mess in my room. Great. That means you no longer have more mess, but you still also have to do the work to clean it up. And also, you can't actually just steal a room and be like, done, no more mess. Like, things come in whether you like it or not. And so that is why we will always have to have this kind of release, whether it feels right or comfortable or not. And sometimes, especially if it makes us feel uncomfortable to have them. Because the thing is, like, when we do these releases, we are saying very plainly, like, people who feel this way and look this way and identify as this are welcome here. Not only are they welcome, but they're active. They're officially part of this. They're running things when we can get them in here to run the thing. Like, it is the burden of proof to say that someone is safe with us is always with us, not with them to figure it out.
Absolutely true.
And I think at the end of the day, like, I know that people don't always agree on what is the right thing and what is tolerant and what is intolerance. Like, we don't always agree because we have different faiths and different belief systems and all those things. But I hope that WordPress as as a community as a whole can all agree that we want and believe that human beings deserve basic dignity for what they are doing, what they hope to be able to do in the future, and what they want others to be able to do after them. Like, I hope that we agree that if you are in here doing this, you should have an easy, good, and fruitful time doing it.
Mm-hmm. I think
Did I
true
answer
allies.
everything?
I think you did. I'm going to add a commentary too, that
Okay.
to be a good ally doesn't just mean come stand beside me. Sometimes it says
Yeah.
stand in front of me and let me stand back and let you have the spotlight for a bit, to show
Yeah.
what you really can do, and not just because it's not about me, it's about
Yes.
other people, and that's hard for some people to learn, because that's not how we're raised. Sometimes we're raised about us and what to do, to look out for ourselves, like you said. And does it look like me? Does it sound like me? Is this something that is comfortable for me? And
Yes.
do those people look like me? Do those people sound like me? All of those things. And so, yeah, it's not always easy, but like we said, growth is work. So
Yeah, sure is.
okay, a little more lighthearted question. I
Sure.
should probably know the answer to this, but how do
Meh.
we, like I'm air quoting if you're listening, how do we decide on which jazz artist the release is named after? Is it open for
Oh, yeah.
input? Is it a surprise at the release time? Do we vote on it? How does that happen?
Oh, yeah. So this is, for starters, it is a surprise on the day of the release. Like
I love it.
almost nobody knows about it. And for a long time, it was literally nobody that knew about it ahead of time. So that is something that Matt chooses. Matt chooses the jazzer every time and will let me know, or the release lead, whoever it is that is available in that particular moment. Um, and we go from there. So there have been a few times where, and the 5.6 was one of them, and there was another one somewhere along the way where like I was so specifically focused on one type of thing that we were doing in that release that I was like, you must have this one, this must be our jazzer. And like I just went rogue and did some advocacy about it.
I
As
love
I
it.
do. And so yeah, that's a thing, like that's a Easter egg kind of thing from Matt to us. But yeah, in 5.6, I did say to him, like, these are the top three that I would choose if I were you. Go
For
for
what
it.
it's worth. I love it. Maybe I didn't know that, but I love knowing that now. And it's like, and it's a little bit of an access into his jazz mind and who he listens to and appreciates. And I don't own vinyl. I know that man owns vinyl. I've seen it, like
Yeah.
pictures, I think, of walls of vinyl, but yeah, that's awesome.
I now own vinyl, but I don't have
Oh.
anything to play it on, so it just is theoretical vinyl.
And I grew up with a Wi-Fi, but I do not have that anymore. This big, huge, not Wi-Fi. I said Wi-Fi,
A
hi-fi,
hi-fi. Yeah.
a hi-fi, this giant piece of, and my daughter recently got one on Buy Nothing, Sell Nothing on a Facebook group. And she's like, Mom,
Nice.
have you ever heard of this thing? And I'm like, oh, honey, I grew up with that thing.
Have you ever
So
heard of
fun.
8-tracks?
You know, exactly.
I
Exactly.
love it.
So fun.
Oh.
Is there anything else you would like to share about I'm calling it the UG release now because it's so much faster than underrepresented gender release. Is it the UG release team? It just
Oh.
sounds like pretty cool. Anything else you'd like to share with us? Anything else about, what we're doing as far as representative work within WordPress? The floor is
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah. So I think that, so here's a thing that I want everyone to know and understand about the first time around on this. So the first time around on this, I asked everyone who was participating in it to help me identify the holes in the documentation that we have. I said not a couple years ago, my gracious time, at WordCamp Europe last year, not this year, so 2022, I said that I think that documentation is a DEI matter. Um, and I think it is. Like, it's not the case that anybody's going to show up and like read the handbook front to back and then they know everything. It is a lot like reference material and source material for our onboarding that happens best when you're doing that with another person, another existing WordPresser. But they documented the absolutely living daylights out of that release process, in a way that helped to update our level of effort tracker to be more honest and more consistent. And and they did a spectacular job of then also documenting the bits and pieces that are not specific to that release squad, like things that were also happening in the related teams, because all of the teams are related to everybody. And while I would ask them to do that again for sure, because fresh eyes are so unusual in that particular type of process that when you have them, you absolutely have to say, like, you've never seen it before. Tell us everything that was not confusing and is confusing and that you hated. Like, you've got to make sure that you get that information while it's available. But it also was one of those things that really pained me to have to ask them to do. Underrepresented genders in, and also like non cis het white folks, period, across technology and across the workforce are frequently asked to do cleanup tasks or like basic administrative work, and sometimes not even asked, just it is an expectation because no one else is going to do it and someone's got to, and it might as well be the lowest person we've got. And so I really hated that because it does really play into that stereotype also. I talked about it with this release squad too, especially I talked with my group of release coordinators. So Francesca Marano, Ebony Butler, and Chloe Bringman. I said, like, I hear everyone calling for a full like maintenance release where we do nothing but just do bottle pick up trash in WordPress for 4 months and then ship this in November. And like, while I have absolutely, that's a doable thing on a wish list, it is a thing that I would want to be able to do. It's not something that I want this group of people to have to say they did. You know what I mean?
No, I get it. Yeah.
Like, we're not going to say we did none of it, because if there's a bug worth fixing, we're going to fix it, especially if it's easy. It's not even easy if it fits in what we're trying to accomplish, because no easy problems exist in WordPress anymore. But I really worried about that for this release squad also. Like, so many of them also were like, we want to pick up the trash, and I'm like, me too. But also, like, let's do because we always are doing trash pickup, and
Right.
maybe we need to have just a standard group doing trash pickup someday, as opposed to like the people who always are expected to do that kind of invisible labor in the world. And I know that for a lot of people, they're going to hear this podcast and be like, she is making it political or whatever. I know that. But also, the fortunate fact is that I don't find that access to basic human rights is a political question for me. So I'm not making anything political. I'm just making it human. And if someone wants to make it political, then they are welcome to do that over there where we can't see them right now, because we're really trying to get a big old release out the door. So, yeah, that's my thing I want to share.
Can I add to that a little bit too?
Of course, always, Michelle.
I think that there are people who feel like this is a big, huge organization. It's the community. It's a project that is a behemoth, and it is, right? And so maybe I don't matter because I'm one of however 100,000 million, whatever users there are. But the truth is, every single one of us does and can have a voice in it. And I do realize that I have a bit of a bigger voice than some people do, but just my experiences at one WordCamp and writing about one post last year changed a lot of things this year as far as accessibility, physical disability accessibility at WordCamps. WordCamp Asia made sure that they were, physically accessible. WordCamp Europe is in conversation with me the whole time. We have a squad on WordCamp US specifically for disability, and there's a page in the handbook now. So just my advice to people is, if you want to be involved, get involved. If you do see something that isn't accommodating for any underrepresented group, say something, come forward. If you don't feel like your voice is big enough, talk to somebody whose voice is bigger, and make sure that people are aware of what's happening, because this isn't WordPress for some, this is WordPress for all. And squads like this release team is one way to help make sure that everybody's voices are heard. So I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, making it possible that others of us can do that work too. Yes.
I'm leaving a big break in here in case you don't want to include this thing. So I left a big old break, so you can take it out if you want to take it out. But during COVID, like, this work was very hard. And I frequently was just not sure that we could all still stick together about it. And I found this writing. I have a professional coach, and he sent me this little thing written by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. It is called "You Were Made for This." And this one line went through my head all the whole time we were at the community summit and Contributor Day and WordCamp US. And I'm going to read it word for word. I looked it up because it's very important to read it word for word in my mind. And she says, "Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach." And it's just so true. For one, that is just a true statement. And for two, like, I think it really applies to WordPress. And it's exactly what you're saying. Like, it's very easy for us to say, like, I personally am not having an impact on this. Like, some days I also feel like I am personally not having an impact on anything. And I have a lot of impact around here. And so, like, I think it's important for us to remember that no one is called to do this work because one person can fix it all. Everybody is called to this work because it takes all of us to do it, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm going to send you a link to this because it
Please do.
Like, I go back to it probably once a week. There's that, and then the what is it? Sister Mary Fox, or whatever it is, the unorthodox prayer that she wrote. Both of those things, I have them just around. And then also this thing, A Prayer for Blessing by Robert Bodie. And my favorite line is "May we all be the creators and priests and nurses and heroes, and may our song lift beyond these walls to light the world." That's from 2017, Robert Bodie. But anyway, I got really carried away with just like words I love in the world. So you can cut that part out if you need.
Oh, we're keeping it. We're keeping all of it. I love it. And I'm hoping that they will inspire others like you have inspired me with those words this morning. So
fingers crossed.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I truly appreciate you. And I know others like me appreciate you as well. And the job is not always easy, but I know that you feel that it's valuable and worth it. And thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
Yes. And thank you so much for having me today.
It's our pleasure, for sure. And we'll see you at the next event, hopefully, whenever and wherever that will be.
Ta-da! Yes.
And we'll see everybody else on the next episode of WP Constellations. Thank you. WP Constellations is a production of Stellar WP, home of the events calendar, LearnDash, Give WP, Cadence, Iconic, Solid WP, Orderable, and Restrict Content Pro. Learn more about the Stellarverse at stellarwp.com.